The restaurant was alive with quiet chatter, clinking glasses, and the smell of expensive food floating through the air. It was one of those fancy places where everyone spoke softly, where the lights were warm and the sound of money seemed to hum in the background. Among the polished tables and dressed-up guests moved a young waitress, moving quickly but quietly, always careful not to draw too much attention to herself. She wasn't like the other staff. While they chatted when things slowed down or complained softly about long hours, she kept to herself. Her focus stayed on the tray she carried and the customers she served. Her uniform was always neat, her smile polite but distant and her movements graceful, almost as if she was used to performing. Her name was Lily. To most of the customers, she was just another face in the restaurant, someone who brought food and disappeared again. But the regulars noticed something different about her. There was a quiet calm in her eyes, a look that didn't quite fit the noise and brightness of the place. Some thought she looked sad. Others thought she looked tired. The truth was, she carried a story that few people would ever imagine. Before she worked here, Lily had once dreamed of becoming a pianist. Not just any pianist. She wanted to play on big stages, travel the world, and make people feel something deep when they heard her music. She had spent her childhood sitting at a second-hand piano in a small apartment, practicing for hours every day. Her mother would sit nearby, humming along or closing her eyes as she listened. They didn't have much, but the sound of those keys filled their home with something warm and alive. Her mother used to tell her, "You don't have to be rich to make the world quiet with your music. You just need to be honest when you play." Those words stayed with her. But dreams have a way of fading when real life arrives. When her mother fell sick, everything changed. Hospital bills came in faster than she could pay. The piano lessons had to stop. The piano itself had to be sold to cover treatment. Slowly, the music faded from their lives, replaced by long days of work and nights of worry. Lily took whatever job she could, cleaning, waiting tables, doing anything to keep her mother comfortable. She told herself it was temporary, just until things got better. But things didn't get better. The hospital visits became routine, and the money never stretched far enough. One day, she saw an ad for a waitress position at a luxury restaurant downtown. She almost didn't go. Her clothes weren't fancy, and she didn't think they'd hire someone like her. But she went anyway, and by some small stroke of luck, they did. That's how she ended up here night after night, serving people who never looked twice at her. There was a piano in the corner of the restaurant, a grand one, shiny but silent. It was mostly for decoration, something to make the place look even more elegant. Sometimes a hired pianist played soft background music during special events, but most days it sat untouched. Still, every time Lily walked past it, her eyes lingered for a moment longer than they should. She never reached out, never touched it. But inside her, something always stirred, like an old wound that hadn't fully healed. Her co-workers sometimes noticed how she looked at it. Once one of them joked, "You stare at that piano like it owes you money." She smiled politely but didn't explain. No one there knew that the sound of those keys used to be her entire world. The job was hard. The shifts were long. But Lily didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Every tip went toward rent, medicine, and the never-ending list of expenses that came with her mother's illness. By the time she got home each night, her feet ached, her hands smelled faintly of food, and her back throbbed from carrying trays all day. Still, she always made time to check on her mother, feed her soup, talk softly to her, and make sure she was comfortable before bed. Sometimes, when the city outside grew quiet, Lily would sit near the window and hum. She didn't have a piano anymore, but she remembered every melody she'd ever played. Her fingers moved slightly in the air as if they were pressing invisible keys. Music still lived in her, just hidden, waiting. Her life had fallen into a rhythm. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Days blurred together, each one the same. She had learned how to move like a shadow, unnoticed, unbothered, invisible. That was safer. People couldn't hurt you if they didn't really see you. Then one Friday evening, everything changed. The restaurant was unusually crowded that night. There was talk among the staff that a very important guest was coming. Someone rich and powerful, the kind of person whose name everyone recognized. Lily didn't pay much attention to gossip, but even she felt the tension in the air. The manager made everyone line up before the shift started, checking uniforms, straightening collars, reminding them to smile. By the time the guest arrived, the restaurant was glowing. The host rushed forward to greet him, a tall man in a black suit with an air of confidence that made the room seem smaller. He was the kind of man who didn't have to speak loudly to be heard. People whispered his name, glancing his way. He was a billionaire investor, known for his sharp tongue and unpredictable moods. He came with a group of friends all laughing too loudly, all trying too hard to impress him. Their table was set near the center of the room, close enough that everyone could see them. Lily was assigned to serve them. She felt her stomach tighten a little, not out of fear but from the pressure of not making a single mistake. She'd dealt with demanding customers before, but something about this man's presence made her extra cautious. His eyes scanned everything, the plates, the glasses, the servers, as if judging whether each detail was worthy of his attention. The first half of the evening went smoothly. Drinks were poured, dishes served, and laughter filled the air. Lily moved quietly between tables, doing her best to stay invisible. But when she reached across to pour water for one of the guests, her hand trembled slightly. The glass tilted just enough for a few drops to spill onto the billionaire's sleeve. It wasn't much, barely a splash, but his laughter stopped instantly. The entire table went silent. Lily froze. The man looked at his sleeve, then up at her. His eyes were cold, sharp, almost amused. "Careless, aren't we?" he said softly. But the edge in his voice cut deep. The other guests waited for his reaction, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Lily immediately apologized, reaching for a napkin, but he waved her off. "Do you even know how much this suit costs?" he asked, his voice calm but mocking. "Probably more than you make in a year." Her face turned pale. The room around her felt smaller, heavier. She wanted to disappear, to run to the back kitchen and hide, but she stood still, holding the tray against her chest, her lips pressed together in silence. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Then his gaze drifted toward the piano in the corner. He smirked. "Tell me something," he said.
"Do you play?"
Lily blinked, unsure how to answer. "I used to," she whispered. "Used to?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Well, that's convenient. Why don't you play something for us then? Make up for your little mistake." The words hit her like a shock. She froze, her heart pounding. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly. "I'm just a waitress here." "I can't," he cut her off. "Can't or won't." His tone turned teasing, but underneath it was a challenge. The other guest chuckled softly, sensing entertainment. "I'll tell you what," he said, leaning forward with a grin. "If you can play something good, something that actually impresses me, I'll forget about this accident. Maybe I'll even tip you." The air grew thick. Everyone was watching now, not just his table, but others nearby who had overheard. The waiters stood still, pretending to work while listening closely. Lily's hands felt cold. She hadn't played in years. Her fingers weren't used to keys anymore. Her heart wasn't used to being seen. But the look on his face told her this wasn't just a request, and it was a command. And if she refused, she might lose her job right there. She turned slowly toward the piano. For the first time in a long time, she felt fear and longing at once. The shiny black instrument waited silently, reflecting the warm lights above. She could almost hear her mother's voice again, soft and calm. "You just need to be honest when you play." Lily took a deep breath. She didn't know what was going to happen next. But as she walked toward the piano, every step echoed through the restaurant, each one heavier than the last. The crowd fell quiet, waiting to see what the quiet waitress would do. And in that silence, her story, the one she thought she had left behind, was about to begin again. The room had gone quiet, so quiet that even the sound of glasses clinking stopped. Every eye in the restaurant followed the young waitress as she slowly walked toward the grand piano. No one had ever seen her touch it before. Some people whispered, others leaned forward in curiosity. The billionaire who had challenged her watched with a smug look, his elbow resting on the table as if he was watching a show he had personally arranged. Lily's heart was pounding so loudly that it almost drowned out everything else. Her hands trembled slightly as she stopped beside the piano. It looked bigger up close, polished and cold, like something that didn't belong to her world anymore. She hadn't sat at a piano in years, and now suddenly, she was being forced to play in front of a room full of strangers, people who wouldn't understand what this moment meant to her. She stood still for a few seconds, trying to steady her breathing. Memories rushed through her mind like a flood. The smell of her mother's small apartment, the sound of laughter when she played, the warmth of sunlight on the old piano keys. It all felt so far away, like a life that had belonged to someone else. The billionaire's voice broke through her thoughts. "What's the matter?" he said loudly enough for others to hear. "Don't tell me you've forgotten how." A few people laughed under their breath. It was quiet, but she heard it. She turned her eyes toward him, her face calm though her chest felt heavy. "No," she said softly. "I remember." She sat down on the piano bench. The seat creaked a little. Her fingers hovered above the keys, unsure, awkward, almost afraid. She pressed one note, just one. The sound rang out softly through the room. It was clear, gentle, and simple, but it felt like something inside her woke up after years of silence. The billionaire leaned back, unimpressed. "Well, go on," he said. Lily took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She had no sheet music, no plan. Her mind was blank, but her heart wasn't. Slowly, she began to play. At first, the notes were shaky, almost broken. It was as if her hands were searching for memories buried deep inside her. But as she continued, something shifted. Her fingers began to move more freely, finding rhythm, emotion, and shape. The melody started to flow, soft at first, then stronger, fuller. The chatter that had started at the billionaire's table stopped completely. The laughter faded. Even the sound of forks and knives on plates went silent. There was only her music, pure and unguarded. Every note carried something real. The sadness of long nights working just to survive. The love she had for her mother. The dreams she had locked away because life had demanded something else from her. Her music wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished or practiced, but it was honest. It came from a place so deep that no one in that room could ignore it. As she played, something in her began to loosen. All the heaviness she had carried, all the quiet pain, came pouring out through her fingertips. Her eyes stayed closed and her body swayed gently with the rhythm. For the first time in years, she wasn't a waitress serving others. She was herself again. She was the girl who believed music could make people feel. The billionaire stared at her, his expression unreadable. The arrogant smirk had disappeared. His hand, which had been resting casually on the table, slowly moved to his chin. He didn't look away once. When she finally played the last note, it hung in the air for a long, trembling moment. The restaurant was silent. No one dared to clap or even move. It was as if time itself had stopped to listen. Lily opened her eyes and looked around. Everyone was staring at her, but not the way she feared they would. Their expressions were soft, quiet, thoughtful. Some people looked surprised. Others seemed touched, like they didn't expect to feel something that deep in a restaurant full of chatter and noise. The billionaire was still silent. For a long second, he just looked at her. Then, slowly, he clapped his hands once. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet room. After that, others began to clap too. Softly at first, then louder. But Lily didn't smile. She stood up quietly, her eyes low, and said, "Thank you," before turning to walk back to her station. She didn't play for applause. She played because she had to, because it was the only way to let her heart speak after being silent for so long. As she walked away, the billionaire spoke again. "Wait." She stopped and turned slightly, unsure what he wanted. He looked at her differently now, not as someone beneath him, but with a kind of curiosity he couldn't explain. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. Lily hesitated. "My mother taught me," she said softly, "before she got sick." He nodded slowly, as if trying to process her words. "You played with feeling," he said after a pause. "You don't see that often." There was something almost sincere in his tone, but Lily didn't know if she should trust it. She simply nodded politely and excused herself, walking back toward the counter. Her co-workers stared at her in disbelief. One of them whispered, "Where did that come from?" Another said quietly, "I didn't know she could even play." Lily just smiled faintly and went back to work. The rest of the night passed quietly. The billionaire and his guests didn't laugh as much after that. Their voices were lower, their eyes thoughtful. And every now and then she could feel his gaze on her. Not in a cruel way, but as if he was seeing her for the first time. When the night finally ended and the last customer left, the manager came over, still stunned. "You didn't tell me you could play like that," he said, half scolding, half amazed. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" The entire restaurant stopped. Even he stopped. Lily just gave a small smile. "It was just one song," she said softly. One song, the manager repeated, shaking his head. That song probably saved your job tonight. She laughed quietly, a sound so soft it almost disappeared into the clinking of glasses being cleaned up. Maybe, she said. But that wasn't why I played. He looked at her, confused. Then why? She glanced at the piano again, still glowing under the dim lights. Because I missed it, she said simply. After work, she changed out of her uniform and walked out into the night air. The city was quiet now, the streets wet from light rain. She pulled her coat tighter around her and began the long walk home. Her shoes made soft sounds against the pavement, but inside her mind, the melody she played still lingered. It wasn't just music anymore, it was a memory, a reminder of the person she used to be. When she reached her small apartment, the lights were dim. Her mother was asleep, her breathing slow and steady. Lily sat beside her bed for a while, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She looked tired but peaceful. Lily whispered softly, "I played tonight, Mom. After all these years, I played again." Her mother stirred slightly, half asleep, and murmured something Lily could barely hear, a small smile on her face. It was enough. Lily sat there quietly, watching her for a long time. The room was still, the sound of rain tapping softly against the window. For the first time in a long time, she felt light. Something inside her had shifted. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she knew it wasn't over. Far away, in a luxury car parked outside the restaurant, the billionaire sat in silence too. His driver waited patiently, but the man didn't give the order to leave right away. He was thinking about the girl, the song, the way the room had gone still. He didn't understand why it had affected him. He had heard world-class musicians before, attended concerts and galas, but this was different. Her music hadn't been perfect. It had been human, raw, full of truth, something he hadn't felt in years. As the car finally pulled away, he looked once more through the tinted window at the restaurant. The piano was barely visible now, just a dark shape under the lights. He didn't know it yet, but that one tune, played by a quiet waitress with tired hands, had already started to change him. And for Lily, it was the beginning of something she never expected. A path that would lead her back to the music she thought she had lost forever. The next morning came quietly. The sun peeked through the thin curtains of the small apartment, lighting up the faded wallpaper and the little table near the window. Lily sat there with a cup of tea, her eyes half lost in thought. The sound of the piano from the night before still echoed in her heart. She couldn't stop thinking about how it felt, her fingers moving again, the keys responding like they remembered her. Her mother, still weak but awake now, noticed the calm look on her face. "You seem different today," she said softly. Lily smiled. "Maybe I am," she said. "I played last night." Her mother's eyes widened. "Played? You mean the piano?" She nodded. "A customer. He made me play. I didn't have a choice." Her mother looked worried for a second. "Did something happen? Did they embarrass you?" Lily shook her head gently. "No, it was strange. I was scared at first, but once I started, I forgot about everything. It was like I was somewhere else." Her mother smiled faintly, her voice soft. "That's what music does. It takes you home." The day passed slowly. Lily went about her usual chores, but her mind wasn't on them. She kept thinking about that billionaire, the one who had made her play. She could still see the look in his eyes when the music stopped. There was something there she didn't understand. For someone who seemed so cold, he had looked moved, almost broken for a moment. Later that day, as she prepared to leave for work, her mother said, "Maybe that piano wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was a door opening again." Lily didn't reply, but those words followed her all the way to the restaurant. When she arrived, the atmosphere felt different. People greeted her with smiles instead of the usual rushed nods. One of her co-workers whispered, "You went viral, you know." She frowned. "What?" He showed her his phone. Someone had recorded her playing the piano the night before. A short clip, but enough to show her face and the sound of her music. It had been shared online, gaining thousands of views overnight. The comments were full of praise. "Who is she? And this girl plays with soul." That song made me cry. Lily's hands trembled as she scrolled through them. She had never wanted attention, especially not like this. "I didn't ask for anyone to film me," she said quietly. "I know," her coworker replied. "But people loved it. Even the boss was talking about you this morning." Before she could respond, the manager called her into the office. When she stepped inside, he was standing by the window, smiling in a way that made her nervous. "You've caused quite a stir," he said. "That video has people asking about you. Reporters even called to ask if we hired musicians now." She didn't know what to say. "You did something special last night," he continued. "Even the man you played for and he called this morning." Lily's heart skipped. "He called?" "Yes, he asked about you. Said he wanted to meet again." Her throat went dry. "Why?" The manager shrugged. "Didn't say. But he didn't sound angry. He sounded interested." The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Every time the door opened, she thought it might be him. But he didn't show. She didn't know if she wanted him to. Part of her was curious, maybe even grateful, but another part still remembered the humiliation of that night before she played. It was late when she finally finished cleaning up. Most of the staff had gone home. She was about to take off her apron when the manager appeared again, holding a small envelope. "This came for you," he said. She took it, frowning. "For me?" He nodded. "A man dropped it off earlier. Said you'd know." Her heart pounded as she opened the envelope. Inside was a note written on fine paper. The handwriting was sharp but elegant. "You played with honesty. I'd like to hear you again. C." There was also a business card tucked inside, the logo of a well-known music foundation printed in gold. She stared at it, confused. What did he want from her? That night she couldn't sleep. She turned the card over in her hand again and again, wondering if it was some kind of joke. But the more she thought about it, the more she felt something she hadn't in years, a quiet flicker of hope. The next day, after work, she found herself standing outside the address on the card. It was a tall glass building downtown, with people walking in and out in suits. She almost turned around and left, but something inside pushed her forward. The receptionist greeted her politely, and when Lily mentioned the billionaire's name, the woman immediately picked up the phone. Within minutes, she was escorted to a private lounge upstairs. The billionaire was there, sitting by a window overlooking the city. He turned when she entered, his face calm but unreadable. "You came," he said. Lily stood quietly for a moment before nodding. "I wasn't sure if I should." He motioned for her to sit. "You surprised me that night," he said. "I thought you'd play something simple, just to get it over with. But you didn't. You played like someone who's lived through something." She didn't know how to respond. Her fingers twisted together nervously. He continued, "I've been around music all my life. Expensive concerts, famous names. But what you did that night, it was real. And real is rare." Lily looked at him carefully. "Why did you make me play in the first place?" she asked softly. He sighed, glancing out the window. "Because I thought I could. Because I wanted to see if someone like you could impress me. But I was the one who ended up learning something." There was a long silence. Finally, he turned back to her. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want to offer you something." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were papers, an offer letter from a music foundation. "They sponsor young talents, people who deserve a second chance. I made a call this morning. If you want, you can train again, properly, full support." Lily stared at the paper, unable to speak. It didn't feel real. "I don't want anything in return," he said quietly. "Consider it a small apology for the way I treated you that night." She looked at him for a long time, her eyes softening. "Why me?" He smiled faintly. "Because when you played, you made me remember something I'd forgotten, what it feels like to feel." Lily closed the folder and placed her hands on top of it. "Thank you," she said simply. He nodded. "You deserve it. Don't waste it." When she left the building, the air outside felt lighter somehow. The city lights sparkled like tiny stars, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was walking towards something, not running from it. That night when she got home, she told her mother everything. At first, her mother didn't believe her, thinking it was too good to be true. But when she saw the papers, tears filled her eyes. "I told you the piano wasn't a punishment," she whispered. "It was a door." Lily smiled and held her mother's hand. "Then maybe it's time to walk through it." Days passed, and soon she began attending lessons again, nervous but determined. The first time she sat at a real piano in the training hall, her hands shook. But as she began to play, that old feeling returned. the one that made the world quiet. Her teacher listened with awe. "You play like someone who's been hurt," he said. She smiled softly. Maybe that's the only way to play honestly. Meanwhile, the billionaire sometimes watched her progress from afar. He never interfered, never asked for recognition. But there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that one careless moment, one challenge made out of pride, had changed 2 lives forever. Lily's playing began to draw attention. Her old video resurfaced online with new headlines. Waitress turned pianist, the girl who silenced a room. People were inspired by her story, by how she rose from ordinary life through a single act of courage. But for Lily, it wasn't fame or attention that mattered. It was that she could play again, that she had found her voice. The same hands that once carried trays now danced across the keys with grace and purpose, and every time she played, she thought of her mother's words, "You just need to be honest when you play." Little did she know, the night she played for that billionaire was only the beginning. Her next performance would not only change her life, it would change his too, in ways neither of them could have imagined. The evening of the next performance arrived quietly, without fanfare. Lily had been practicing for weeks, each day filled with long hours at the music foundation. Her fingers had grown stronger, her confidence returning with every note. Still, the thought of performing in front of people again made her stomach tighten. She had learned to play in empty rooms, in small practice halls, and even in her tiny apartment. But now the stage was real, the audience real, and the pressure heavier than anything she had felt before. The room she entered was small but elegant, filled with softly glowing lights. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and the walls were lined with mirrors that reflected the faint warmth of the lamps. On one side sat the billionaire who had first forced her to play that night. He wasn't smiling, nor was he judging. He simply watched, quiet and still, as if waiting to see what she would do with her gift now. She took a deep breath and approached the piano. The instrument was new, polished and smooth beneath her fingers. For a moment she hesitated, feeling the weight of all the moments that had led her here. The years of sacrifice, the nights of exhaustion, the small apartment where her mother had sat listening as she practiced. She closed her eyes and let the memories flow through her, letting them guide her fingers. The first notes were soft, hesitant, as if she were testing the waters. Then gradually they grew stronger. The melody rose and fell with a natural rhythm, full of emotion and depth. It wasn't just music. It was her life poured into sound. Every note carried the pain of lost years, the hope she had clung to, and the love she had felt for her mother. The billionaire leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on her hands. There was no smirk, no arrogance, only quiet attention. He could feel the honesty in each note, the way her soul spoke through the piano. The other people in the room were drawn in too. Some held their breath, some closed their eyes, and others sat in stunned silence. Lily played longer than she had planned. The piece she chose was one she had composed herself in secret, a melody that held every feeling she had never shared with anyone. It was full of sorrow, longing, and quiet triumph. She didn't play for applause or for recognition or even for the billionaire. She played because she had to, because this was the way she could tell the world who she truly was. When the final note faded, there was silence. No one moved. No one clapped. The room felt frozen in time, as if everyone was holding their breath, afraid to break the spell she had created. Her hands rested on the keys, trembling slightly, and she opened her eyes slowly, taking in the faces of those who had listened. The billionaire's eyes were different now. They were softer, reflective, almost human. He wasn't looking at her as someone who served him coffee or spilled water on his suit. He was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. It wasn't just talent he witnessed. It was courage, honesty, and heart. Finally, he stood and walked toward her. He didn't say anything at first, just watched as if trying to understand what he had just experienced. Then he spoke, his voice low but full of warmth. "I didn't know it was possible to play like that and still be real." Lily blinked, unsure how to respond. She had expected praise, maybe even a compliment, but the sincerity in his tone unsettled her. I just played what I felt," she said quietly. He nodded slowly. "That's what matters. People can play perfectly, technically, but they forget to play with truth." "You didn't forget. The room remained quiet even as the audience began to stir. Some people whispered to each other, moved by what they had just heard. Others stared in awe, unable to speak. Lily stood feeling a mixture of exhaustion and relief. This was more than a performance. It was a moment that had changed something inside her, and she realized something inside him too. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I've spent my life surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. But you didn't care about that. You played honestly. That's a rare gift. Lily felt a lump in her throat. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Most of her life she had been invisible. She had served, cleaned, and worked without anyone noticing. And now, suddenly, someone powerful, someone who usually demanded everything and gave little, was acknowledging her completely. I didn't mean to impress anyone, she said softly. I know, he replied, and that's why it worked. The rest of the evening passed differently than she expected. People asked her questions, complimented her, and some even took notes, interested in her story. But what she noticed most was the change in him. The billionaire who had been so cold, so commanding, so impossible to read, now seemed quiet, reflective, almost thoughtful. He didn't speak loudly, didn't demand attention, and didn't make anyone feel small. It was as if her music had reminded him what it was like to be human. When the room finally emptied, leaving only the two of them, he spoke again. I wanted to test you, he admitted. I wanted to see what you would do under pressure. I thought I could break you. But instead, you reminded me of something I lost a long time ago. Lily looked at him carefully. What did you lose? She asked. A part of myself, he said quietly. Somewhere along the way I forgot how to feel without calculating it. How to see the world without seeing what I could gain from it. That night, you brought it back. Her chest tightened. She had expected to feel pride, relief, maybe even fear, but this honesty from him was new. She realized that her music had done more than showcase talent. It had touched a person, changed him in a way that words could not. I didn't do it for you, she said softly, almost to herself. I know, he replied, and that's why it mattered. They sat in silence for a few moments, the piano between them like a bridge connecting two very different lives. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet transformation that had occurred inside that small room. Later, as Lily left, he handed her a small envelope. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a note and a small card. The note read, "Keep playing. Don't let the world silence you. You have a gift, one that can reach places I never thought possible." The card was an invitation, not a command, not a challenge, to perform at a charity event sponsored by his foundation. It was a chance to share her music with people who would appreciate it, not judge it. Lily felt a strange mix of emotions: fear, excitement, and gratitude. She had never imagined her life could change like this, that one song could open so many doors, that someone who once seemed so untouchable could be moved so deeply. That night, she went home and sat by her mother's side, holding the envelope tightly. It's real, she whispered. They actually want me to play. Her mother smiled, tears in her eyes. You were meant to do this. All along, the piano wasn't just a dream. It was your voice waiting to be heard. Lily nodded. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her past lift slightly. She had played honestly, fully, and without fear. And in doing so, she had reminded someone, and herself, of the power of music, the power of truth, and the power of courage. Over the next few weeks, she prepared for the event. Each practice session was filled with nerves and determination. She remembered the look in the billionaire's eyes the first night she played, and it reminded her why she couldn't hold back. She couldn't play for approval or for fame. She had to play with honesty, with every piece of herself, because that was what mattered. When the night of the event arrived, the room was full of people, all eager to hear the music that had touched so many online. But Lily's focus was narrow. She saw only the piano, the keys, and the memories that had led her here. And as she played, she realized that this time, she wasn't just performing. She was speaking, feeling, and living every note. The music carried through the hall, weaving through the crowd like a gentle wave. People leaned forward, captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound fill them. And in the back of the room, the billionaire watched quietly. No longer the same man who had demanded a performance for his own amusement. He was moved, reflective, and humbled. He realized that he had been reminded of something essential, the humanity he had lost sight of in pursuit of power and wealth. When the final note faded, the hall remained still for a moment. Then applause erupted, but it wasn't the clapping that mattered. It was the way people had listened, truly listened, and how the music had touched hearts. Lily stepped back, feeling a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known she could feel in years. She knew in that moment that her journey was far from over. But for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it fully, to let her music speak, to let her life unfold, and to know that one honest tune could change not just a room, but hearts and lives forever. The days after the charity event passed in a blur of excitement, preparation, and quiet reflection. Lily could hardly believe how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. The small apartment where she and her mother lived now seemed to carry a new energy. Her mother was recovering slowly, her health improving with each passing day, and Lily felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. But the real change wasn't just in her surroundings. It was in herself. She woke up each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, a feeling that every note she played mattered. Even the simple act of sitting at the piano in her apartment now brought her peace. She no longer played just to remember or to feel or to escape. She played because her music had meaning. It had the power to touch hearts, to tell stories, and to heal. The billionaire, too, had changed. He no longer saw the world as a game where only he could win. He began to understand that wealth and power could not replace empathy, sincerity, or the beauty of unguarded emotion. The night of her performance had stayed with him. He found himself thinking about her music at odd moments, recalling the way her hands moved across the keys, and feeling a strange warmth that he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, he requested a meeting with Lily, but it wasn't for another test or challenge. He simply wanted to talk. When she arrived at the sleek office building, he greeted her without the usual stern expression. Instead, there was a quiet respect in his eyes. "You've changed something," he said, "not just for me, but for the people who heard you. That music, that honesty, it reminds me that life isn't only about strategy and profit." Lily smiled faintly. "I just played what I felt," she said. "I didn't know it would affect anyone else." "It affected me," he admitted. "And I think it affected a lot of people. You reminded them that emotions are real, that talent comes from the heart, not just skill or training." They talked for hours that day, but not about money, business, or fame. They spoke about music, dreams, and the meaning behind every note. Lily shared memories of her mother, the little apartment where she had learned to play, and the long years when music had seemed impossible to touch again. He listened, not as a billionaire evaluating a situation, but as a person, someone trying to understand another person's journey. A few weeks later, Lily received an invitation she hadn't expected. The foundation wanted her to perform at a larger event, one attended by people from all over the city. They promised that it would be an audience that would truly appreciate her music, not just the fame or attention it might bring. As the day approached, she practiced endlessly. Her fingers had grown strong again and her confidence was returning, but she still felt a flutter of nerves. Every performance mattered now, not because someone demanded it, but because she wanted each note to tell a story, to carry emotion into the hearts of the listeners. On the night of the event, she arrived early. The hall was grand, filled with hundreds of seats and a massive stage. Lights glimmered off the polished floor, reflecting the anticipation of the audience. She could hear people chatting softly, some taking pictures, others adjusting their seats, all waiting for something special. Lily stood backstage for a few moments, taking deep breaths. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the small apartment, the quiet practice sessions, the spilled drink that had started it all, and the first time she had been forced to play in front of the billionaire. Every memory carried a weight, but also a purpose. She was ready. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage. The applause that greeted her was polite, restrained, but it didn't distract her. She approached the grand piano, taking a seat and placing her hands lightly on the keys. For a moment, the room was quiet, waiting for the music to begin. Then she played. The first notes were gentle, floating through the air like soft whispers. The audience leaned in, captivated. Her fingers moved gracefully, confidently, and with a depth that carried every ounce of emotion she had felt in her life. This was more than technique. It was honesty, vulnerability, and strength all combined. People in the audience began to close their eyes, letting the sound fill them. Some held their hands to their chests as if feeling the music deep inside. The billionaire sat in the front row watching closely, a soft expression on his usually stern face. He wasn't evaluating, judging, or challenging. He was listening, and for the first time, he understood the true power of music, the way it could reach beyond words, beyond wealth, beyond expectations. The melody rose and fell, carrying joy, sorrow, hope, and longing. Every note told a story of a girl who had sacrificed so much, who had endured hardship and loss, and who had found her voice again. The audience didn't just hear the music, they felt it. Their emotions were stirred, some shedding quiet tears, others smiling softly, all touched by the honesty that came from her heart. As the final note lingered in the air, the hall remained silent for a brief moment. Then applause erupted, loud and sincere, filling the room with sound. But it wasn't just noise, it was admiration, respect, and gratitude. People had witnessed something rare and beautiful, and they recognized it immediately. Lily stood, bowed humbly, and stepped back. Her hands still trembled slightly, but this time it wasn't fear or anxiety. It was the release of emotion, the culmination of years of struggle and perseverance. She had done more than perform. She had shared her life through music, and the world had listened. After the event, people approached her, offering compliments and words of encouragement. But the moment that mattered most was when the billionaire walked up to her quietly. He didn't speak at first, simply handing her a small envelope. Inside was a note. "You have reminded us all of what it means to be human. Keep playing, keep sharing, and never lose this honesty. You have the power to change lives, not just with music, but with the truth in your heart." Lily smiled, holding the note close. She realized that everything that had happened, the spilled drink, the challenge, the fear, the years of struggle, had led to this moment. Music had not only given her back her voice, but it had also awakened something in others. The billionaire watched her for a long moment and finally spoke. "You don't know how much you've changed me, not because I wanted to be changed, but because you reminded me that life isn't just about what we have or control. It's about what we feel, what we give, and how we touch others." Lily nodded quietly. She didn't know if words could fully express how she felt, but she understood him in a way that transcended language. The music had spoken for both of them. In the weeks that followed, Lily continued to perform, each performance drawing more attention, but never changing her focus. She played for people who truly listened, for those who wanted to experience something genuine. Her life began to shift gradually, not overnight, but steadily. The foundation provided her opportunities to study further, to explore new pieces, and to meet other musicians who shared her passion. Her mother's health improved steadily, and for the first time in years, their small apartment felt alive with possibility rather than worry. Lily could finally afford lessons, proper instruments, and even small comforts that had been impossible before. Yet she never forgot where she had come from, the struggles she had endured, and the quiet determination that had brought her back to the piano. And the billionaire? He changed too. He became quieter, more reflective, and more aware of the people around him. He no longer used wealth and power to test or control others. He learned to value honesty, emotion, and human connection, lessons he had forgotten long ago until a simple melody reminded him. One evening, as Lily finished a private rehearsal, she looked out the window and saw the city lights twinkling. She thought about the journey she had traveled, the fear, the challenge, the music, the heartbreak, and the hope. She had been a waitress, unnoticed and overlooked, and now she had a life filled with music, purpose, and meaning. She sat at the piano, her fingers brushing the keys lightly. She didn't play for anyone tonight. She played for herself, for her mother, and for the girl she had once been, the one who dreamed big but had been forced to wait. The notes filled the room, soft and steady, carrying a story of courage, honesty, and resilience, and she knew in that moment that her life had changed forever. Not because of fame, recognition, or wealth, but because she had trusted herself enough to play honestly, even when the world had doubted her. That one tune, the one she had played in fear and courage, had not only silenced a room but had awakened hearts, changed perspectives, and opened doors to a future she had never imagined. For Lily, music would always be more than notes and melodies. It was her voice, her heart, and her story, and no matter where life took her, she would always play with honesty, courage, and love. knowing that one person's truth could touch many lives in ways that nothing else could. Her journey had come full circle. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer afraid. And she was ready to face the world one note at a time.